Morales Flores with us to discuss the state of the market for Hampton Roads. Emiliano joined CoStar Group in 2019 and serves as the market analyst for the majority of markets in Virginia and West Virginia. With a background in economics and market analysis, he focuses on how demographics, employment, and economic development influence the ebb and flow of commercial and multifamily real estate fundamentals. Emiliano started his career with Value Tech Realty Services in Tampa, Florida, and he earned a Bachelor of Arts in Economics from the University of South Florida. He is currently a candidate for a Master's in Applied Economics at the University of Maryland. Emiliano, I will now turn the spotlight over to you. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Mel, and thank you everyone for coming today. I appreciate Vama having us. It's always a great time being able to talk to you about the market that you're all in, and hopefully this can also spark some conversations. If anything that you see today raises a question to you, please go ahead and submit that in the chat. I know sometimes we want to wait till the end of the presentation to talk about those, but you might forget about them. So as I'm going through the slides today, feel free to type those in the chat and I'll make sure to address them at the end of the presentation. I have up here our contact information for the apartments.com team. They're a great group. Most of you probably talk to them every few weeks or even on the daily. And then also my contact information for you to reach out to me with any questions, comments, concerns after today's presentation. Don't worry, I will show this information at the end as well, just in case you don't get a chance to jot it down right now. But let's get right into it. So today I'll be talking about the Hampton Roads state of the multifamily market. Here we have a beautiful image from our property, our field research, picturing the icon in downtown Norfolk. I am currently based out of DC. Here's where the CoStar headquarters are, and I'm just outside the Beltway here in Maryland. I have not been able to go down to Hampton Roads since I believe it was last January, and I certainly miss it. So hopefully COVID we'll get sorted out in the next few months and I'll be able to go hang out with y'all down there. But first, a quick agenda. I know Hampton Roads, Norfolk, Virginia Beach, this entire area goes by a lot of names. So first thing I want to do is I want to define the geographic area that the data that I will be showing you corresponds to. Just to make sure we're all on the same page as to when I say Hampton Roads, exactly what that map looks like. Brief look into the economy. As Mel mentioned earlier, my thing is economics. I care a lot about what the economic development is in the area. What jobs are coming in, what jobs are leaving, what demographic fluctuations in the area look like. And so we'll be looking into that. Some construction trends. What has development been doing in the area? Where is it popping up? 2020 was a very active year for construction. Then look into supply and demand. How many units have been hitting the market? How many of those have been leased as they hit the market, and what are vacancies doing? Some rent trends, and then a little bit on the investment side, what kind of properties and how much is selling in the market, who's buying, who's selling. And then we'll do a quick Q&A if you do have any questions towards the end. Again, feel free to submit those in the chat as we're going. But first off, I know not everyone in the call is a CoStar subscriber. We provide commercial real estate data to many sorts of businesses, from banks to management companies. But we do have an interesting thing going on in CoStar. So we have a research market that we call Hampton Roads, and that's a completely different map from the Norfolk MSA. So in market analytics, my universe, we call it Norfolk. That's the Norfolk market, and that's the picture that you're seeing here on the screen. That is the Norfolk, Virginia Beach, Newport News, Virginia, North Carolina metropolitan statistical area. So every time I say Hampton Roads during this presentation, this is what I'm talking about, this entire metropolitan statistical area. all the way up north to Gloucester, and then all the way down, including some parts of North Carolina. I know a lot of maps include Franklin and the county west of it. We currently don't. We base it off of metropolitan statistical areas. And then when I talk about submarkets, the submarkets for Hampton Roads are actually really easy. It's just the either county or city jurisdictions. So I say Chesapeake, it's the entire county, Virginia Beach, the city of Norfolk, and I'll make sure that if I'm talking about the submarket of Norfolk, I'll say the city of Norfolk or Norfolk City. I'll just try to be as specific as possible. But since we have that out of the way, let's get into the economy. And the economy has been doing some really interesting things since last year, obviously, due to the coronavirus. So between February and around April, the area lost the most jobs it has ever lost since the great financial crisis. And this chart is a little busy, so please stick with me here. So on the right side, you'll see all employees. So these are the nominal changes in employment. So in January of 2020, last year, the area had about almost 800,000 total non-farm employees, right? It lost almost 90,000 between February and April. That's this orange bar down here. Those are the lost jobs. So almost 90,000 people lost their employment in that time frame. Now, between April and November of last year, about 69% of those, and that's what these green diamonds represent, 69% of those recovered their employment. So that was about 60,000 people that were able to re-enter back into the economy with their jobs. And then I have it broken down by sectors. So retail trade, 70% of the jobs that were lost had been recovered by November of last year. Manufacturing actually had a loss, so -4%. Education and health services, which are usually one of the recession-resistant sectors, also lost a lot of jobs because you had businesses like dentists, you had hospitals that were not able to do, non-critical procedures. So people deferred those till later on. Okay, if I need to, get some treatment on my teeth, I'm gonna wait until it's not a risk for me to go into the dentist's office and have someone messing around in my mouth. Business services, they didn't lose a lot of jobs, only about 10,000 jobs that they lost. And that's mostly because those jobs were based out of offices and they had a pretty easy transition to working from home. Trade and utilities, we see that those actually expanded after losing some jobs. Leisure, which is your hospitality, also has recovered most of those jobs, about 88% of the more than 30,000 jobs lost, and so forth with government, a net loss as well. But overall, the area is doing extremely well with the recovery, and that's mostly because of the military employment in the area, all of those mission essential jobs that they call them. Most of those employers, not only in the military, but also outside, like Huntington and Ingalls, which we'll talk about a little bit here over in the peninsula, they never really closed because they were considered mission essential and they were being paid by the government, which didn't have a lot of issues, spending a little more money to make sure that people stayed at their job. But now that we have looked at the statistics, let's take a look at some stories. So probably the biggest story of 2020 and that will be delivered in 2021 was the Amazon facilities. Most of you have probably heard of it. If you haven't, they were announced March of last year, March 2020. And there's these two giant facilities going in just a few miles from each other over in Suffolk and Chesapeake. One of them is a robotics center that will employ about 1,000 people. They expect it to be done, and it's pictured here. They expect it to be done some point late this year by 2021. So really quick delivery, even though they just broke ground last year. So that's about 1,000 people, 3.8 million square feet. You see there, it has several floors, and all of that's going to be a combination of people and robots moving around merchandise to fulfill those orders. And then over in Chesapeake, the rest of those 1,500 jobs, 500 people will be working over at a more normal distribution center in Chesapeake. After that, we had Huntington and Ingalls, which I mentioned earlier. These are really great jobs for the area. As we saw through the coronavirus, they were at least, in the specific case of the coronavirus, they were recession resistant because again, they're government funded. We're talking about millions of dollars going into defense here in the area. And in case you're not familiar with them, Huntington and Ingalls, they're just a shipbuilder, mostly fulfilling contracts for the Navy here in Hampton Roads. In this particular case, it's the Unmanned Center of Excellence. And this is basically going to be building drones. So like the drones that conduct airstrikes or conduct research and reconnaissance, it's going to be the same thing, but underwater. And that's going to bring 250 jobs to the area here over the next couple of years. We had their Governor Northam at the groundbreaking ceremony late last year. After that, S23 Holdings, it's going to build a new ship repair campus, 332 jobs. And this is going, what's pictured there is an empty lot right at the tip of the peninsula. They're in Newport News. So they're going to be building this huge campus and again, bringing 32 jobs. And that just keeps complementing the maritime jobs in the area. And they're being attracted not only by the military, but also the Port of Virginia and the fact that they're dredging canals and making the area overall more accessible to deep water vessels. And the final that I have here is one that came out last week. It had been in the talks, I think, since last year, but they confirmed it 1 or 2 weeks ago. CMA CGM, they are a logistics company based out of France. They brought their North American headquarters here to Hampton Roads, specifically in Norfolk. You can see their office building picture right there. And they're bringing about 400 new jobs to the area. Of those 400 jobs, some of them will be located in Northern Virginia. I reached out to them. They did not get back to me with the specific number of people that will be working at the current Norfolk headquarters, but they did say most on their release. So I expect anywhere from 250 to 300 jobs coming to Norfolk over the next few years. But with that, these are some of the projects going on in the area. It's not all of them. 2020, despite it being a tragic year with the coronavirus and tons of unemployment and obviously, the effects of deathly disease on the country, Hampton Roads was really resilient and is doing pretty well on the economic side. And obviously there's more companies still interested in the area. So 2021, if the vaccine goes over well, it seems like after a rocky start, things are starting to get figured out. Hopefully 2021 will be looking up and a much more positive economic environment. But with that, since I have already bored you with what gets me going, the economy, let's talk about some multifamily. So first off, again, back to demographics. This is based on census data, and it is the number of households that either moved in or moved out of Hampton Roads by county. So each one of those bars on the map represents how many households came in either owner occupied or renter occupied between 2010 and 2019. So over in Virginia Beach, we had about, I believe that's about 10,000 households renter occupied that came in, and it's slightly negative. If you see the blue bar goes slightly negative under the map for owner occupied households. Over in Portsmouth, extremely negative owner occupied. And the main takeaway from this graph is that there were more renter occupied households moving into the area than owner occupied, and in most cases, owner occupied households moving out. The one outlier on the graph that you may notice is over in James City County, Jamestown, with a lot more owner occupied households coming in. The fact of it is, not a lot of multifamily development happened over the last 9 to 10 years there. And if you take a look at the building permits for James City County, about 80% of those are for single family construction. So that's the only outlier, but overall, Hampton Roads has been moving in a ton of people renting. But this is across all incomes. So what I went ahead and did was I income truncated it. That just means that I cut it off at the incomes of renters looking to rent about a 3-star or up property in Hampton Roads. So average rent in the fourth quarter of 2019 was about about $1,100. So you take that times 12 months times 3, if they have to make at least 3 times rent to rent your community, that gives you an annual income of $39,420. Okay, so if I cut off incomes there and I look at the renter households that move into the area between 2010 and 2019, we have these numbers. So 9,696 households just in Virginia Beach moved in over the past 10 years. That's a lot of demand for multifamily. And as you can see, everywhere in the area, it was positive. And I have the big 6 up on the screen. Virginia Beach was the biggest, closely followed by Norfolk, but everywhere had a ton of households of renters moving into the area over the past 10 years, even where you're looking at specifically the ones that are looking to rent a market rate unit. Obviously, with COVID-19, a lot of this historical data doesn't mean much to many people, but just given how well Hampton Roads has performed through the pandemic, I think this is still really interesting to look at, because all of these people that moved here over the last 10 years, I doubt, given what the numbers look like right now, and we'll dive into that in a moment, that they're moving out because of COVID. Mostly because a lot of these people have been attracted by the military employment, which again, I said, has been extremely stable through the pandemic. They've been attracted by new companies moving into the area, like Dollar Tree in Chesapeake, and the economic development going on in downtown Norfolk, and also in the peninsula by the shipbuilding industry and other office employers like Ferguson opening up their new headquarters just last year. So overall, really positive demographics in the area. But with that, let's look at what development has been doing. And this is a chart showing units under construction per quarter over the last 10 years. So from 2010 here on the left, all the way to 2021. And 3,000 units or 3,500 units, which we had the most after the Great Financial Crisis over in 2013. Excuse me, that peak that you see over here, we have not gotten anywhere close to that after the low in 2015. And Hampton Roads is a very slow growth market. So even though I've mentioned over and over again that employment has been super stable, it's not growing very fast. So this development has been absorbed pretty well, and it's tame as of now. So it seems like development is cooling off, but I think once developers and investors realize how well this area has done through the pandemic and through financial or economic hardship, there might be some more development hitting the ground here soon in 2021 and into 2022. So here's a map of what delivered in 2020 For reference, and these are only properties that delivered last year, we see a lot of activity in the Virginia Peninsula, some in Williamsburg, and most of it on the south side. For reference, the southernmost circle right here, that is Helix at Summit Point, which I will be talking about in the next slide. So that's about 133 units. So you can take this as a reference for what these other bubbles are. So about 200 units right here, near 300 units up here in the peninsula over in Hampton. So a lot of development hit the ground, or sorry, delivered in 2020, and it was pretty well absorbed. So let's begin with Helix at Summit Point. Helix, or at Chesapeake, it's part of the Summit Point development, 133 units. So these were all pretty much pre-leased within a few months, and it was about 100% occupied, at least by CoStar data, but 100% occupied by the end of the year, despite being delivered only in August, right? So that's a little over 30 units per month of absorption velocity. And a lot of that is probably the fact that it has a huge employer right around the corner with Dollar Tree moving in. But there are also more projects in the pipeline for that area over the next few years. And the one thing interesting about Chesapeake as a whole is we have Amazon going to Suffolk and Chesapeake over in the northern section of the county, but there's not a lot of development going on over there. So it will be really interesting to see where those 1,500 people decide to live with a lack of development in the northern part of that county. Another delivery, Coastal 61 at Oxford Village. This is another market rate property delivered September 2020. Has also had great success from the accounts that I've heard and the data that we've received from them. Also about 20, 30 units per month. Lease up. Marina Villa, a smaller delivery, but something that we'll talk about over in the investment section. Only 105 units right there on the coast on the Norfolk side. It delivered in May 2020, and it was again pretty much 100% occupied by the end of the year. But as of now, supply side risk is minimal for Hampton Roads. This is a chart showing the current supply under construction, and the size of the bars represent the share of that supply under construction in relation to the current inventory. So Williamsburg is a really small submarket, only about 2,000 units. So that's why 223 building under construction represents almost 15% of their current inventory. And most of these are not even close to 5%, which is really good news for Hampton Roads. And Hampton Roads has always had a pretty small percentage of their current inventory under construction, only about 1 to 2% over construction every quarter. Last year, just for reference, about 1,800 units delivered, and we don't have anywhere close to that hitting the market over the next few quarters. Properties under construction right now, same as the last map. Only these are the ones that are currently under construction and that will be delivered over the next few years. We have here the Lofts Front Street over in Norfolk. Very interesting for Virginia Beach. So if you remember from the last map, most of the construction in Virginia Beach had been focused around the arterials that connected to the bigger employment nodes in Norfolk, Chesapeake, and then around town center. But for the first time since 2016, there's something under construction near the oceanfront. And that's really interesting because a lot of the construction that's been going on over there has been usually directed towards hospitality, which has obviously been walloped by the coronavirus in 2020. But now let's get into supply, demand, and vacancy. So this is a bit of a busy chart, so please stick with me here. So on the yellow bars, we have the change in demand. So this is CoStar tracking net move-ins and move-outs. So how many people moved in within a single quarter, how many people moved out, and the sum of that is what's being shown on the chart. Next, we have quarterly change in supply on the blue bars, and these are how many properties have been built and how many have been demolished, and the number of units, the addition of that is what's being shown in the chart in blue. And finally, we have vacancy over on the left and denoted by the green bar. So notice how around 2017, we had some of the higher vacancies in the area, which are really not that high. They never really broke into the double digits, only about 8.5%. They were slashed all the way down to about 3.9 they're sitting at right now in 2020, or sorry, by the end of 2020. And they were slashed in half from the beginning of 2020, a little over 6%, all the way down to 3.9, despite, and you'll see here, some of the highest levels of deliveries, these blue bars, in the second and third quarter of 2020 with no deliveries on the fourth quarter. So a lot of these were deliveries in the Virginia Peninsula, Coastal 61, Helix, at Summit Point. All of those hit the market at the same time, and despite hitting the market through some of the harshest economic conditions that we've had over the past 10 years, they were absorbed very quickly. The one caveat to these really tight vacancies, which have also pushed a lot of rent growth, which we will talk about here in a minute, is that, and you will know this better than anyone, some of these residents, despite occupying a unit, may not be paying their rent, and you cannot evict them because of the CDC moratorium on evictions. I know there have been talks about either not renewing those leases and some other strategies that management are using to try to mitigate those losses. But that's one of the things that may be overstating these vacancies and maybe overstating how well the area is doing. So these are great numbers compared to national averages, but once that CDC moratorium on eviction ends and these proceedings get going, it is very difficult to tell how much the expansion of vacancies may be after these historical low vacancies on the first quarter of 2021. So let's take a look at our forecast. And this is, again, just taking into consideration, let's say the economy keeps going the way that it is right now. We don't lose a lot of jobs after the pandemic, and the eviction moratoriums don't hit too hard. And we see vacancies hanging out around the same range between 4 and 3% here into the next 3 years. But again, that is considering the fact that the eviction moratorium doesn't cause a huge balloon in vacancies and move-outs. And we have similar levels of development as we've had over the past couple of years. But these type vacancies have come to a price for renters, and apartments.com sources a lot of rent data, and we have been able to plot that data into this chart. So these are the one-bedroom rent trends for 2020, and I have indexed these at 100. So these are not actual rents, it's not $100. This is just the index in January of 2020. And then from that, how have rents behaved? So a move from 100 to 101 means that rents increased by 1%. So here you see between, and Norfolk is denoted in green. Here you see from around March, mid-March, that's when all of us started realizing that COVID was a real threat and people started working from home. And people started losing their jobs or not being able to go work at a restaurant or at a hotel where they worked at. We see a slight dip in April when we had the most employment losses, as I talked about at the beginning of the presentation. But from then, one-bedroom rents have increased. And by the end of the year, they reach almost 6% increase as opposed to the national average here in gray that actually decreased about 1% towards the end of the year. And into 2021, we see they receded a little bit here at the end of the year. In December, some of the leasing slowed down, but they're back up. They're back up in 2021. And again, these are mostly for properties over 50 units, the ones that we get the most rent observations for. So let's look at how Norfolk has performed in relation to the rest of the country. So here we have the, here we have again the one bedroom trends for 2020. The green is the national average, and then we're comparing them to some of the bigger markets in the nation. So downtown Washington, downtown Chicago. A lot of these did really poorly in 2020. And one of the reasons for that is when COVID-19 hit and people started working from home, if you have a 500 square foot one bedroom in downtown DC, and now you're forced to work from home there, and you were not able to go down to the Starbucks or down to your coffee shop or the bar or use the gym that got you in the door initially, then all those $3 per square foot that you're paying for that tiny space are not worth it. So a lot of these people started moving out to the suburbs, what they called, it was just massive downtown exodus. And that's why places like Norfolk, Richmond, places that were near this big metros with more affordable, spacious units started performing a lot better in terms of rents. The Inland Empire, that is a market located right next to LA, and Sacramento, again, a relatively more affordable market right next to San Francisco over in California. And all of these saw increases in their rents, while their pricier downtown counterparts like San Francisco, again, Washington, Boston, Seattle, all of those saw diminishing trends all through last year. And these are the changes in rents and asking rents at a national level for each either CBD, so those downtown areas, or the suburban areas. So all downtowns are in blue, and then suburban areas are in red, orange. So we see, again, as expected, downtown areas did poorly. San Francisco did the worst, Seattle, Washington, DC, Nashville, even some places on the Southeast. And over here on the right, we have rents that increase from the March peak to December 31st. Again, the Inland Empire, which is the market right next to Los Angeles, Sacramento, and then Norfolk on the third spot. And this is suburban Norfolk, which that just means places like Virginia Beach, Chesapeake, anywhere that we don't have a central business district. But while that is very impressive with 4.5% for suburban submarkets doing well, even more impressive is the fact that the Norfolk CBD, which is basically just downtown Norfolk, also had an increase in rent, right? And that's because even though there is some, there are some high rises, there's not many. I think there is only 4 in downtown Norfolk, and that's why staying in those areas was still not only desirable, but sought after by the military employees in the area. So here I have plotted the Norfolk one bedroom rents, and I have split them between urban and suburban. So again, urban in blue did trail suburban rents for a little bit, or for most of last year, but despite trailing, it was still positive in 2020. While in places like Washington, DC, there would be a huge gap between the orange and the blue line. And suburban Norfolk did extremely well with about 6.5% by the end of the year. And these are year over year rent changes by submarket. So Hampton had some of the highest rent growth last time I looked at it. And just to be very clear, this is not the change in asking rent. So it's not like a couple new properties opened up and they're asking way higher rents. So that's why there was a big jump in asking rent. These are actual same store rent growth. So we look at a specific property and we see if they have raised their rents from last year. And you see that every single submarket in the area had positive rent growth, and that's very much not the case in most areas of the country. Virginia Beach has always had very strong rent growth, followed by Chesapeake. And Norfolk City, even though it's one of the lower ones in this chart, it was still at 3.5%. Again, a big caveat to consider with these strong rent growth measures is the fact that super tight vacancies have powered these, and that those vacancies may be overstated because of the CDC eviction moratorium. Once those go away and people either get kicked out of their apartments or decide to leave their apartments since they know that the eviction is coming and they don't want it on the record, these may change, and properties may not be able to ask those higher rents on the units that were just vacated. But how much that is going to change and when it will happen, since it's been extended a few times now, is still to be seen. So just a historical and then forecast asking rents for Hampton Roads. Currently, it's sitting just about $1,150 per unit. And these are, again, averages for the entire area, the whole geography that we looked at. But rent growth has been super strong, as we saw in the last chart by submarket for the entire area as well, about 5% in the last quarter of 2020, despite the pandemic. Now, I mentioned the eviction moratorium a few times. So let's say that things don't go as well into the future. CoStar has a couple of forecast scenarios that you can toggle with and see what the impact of the economy might be on rent growth by itself. So if we look at a moderate downside, if we do not recover some of the jobs that we have lost through the pandemic, the outlook is still really, really positive. We have rent growth of about 4%. But again, this is not necessarily considering the impact of those move outs come the end of the moratorium. And just a quick note on investment. I have 2 slides on these. This is the quarterly transaction volume for Hampton Roads over the past 13 years. So you see here on the right side of the chart that from 2017, the market has picked up a lot of steam. 2020 was a little rough just because of the pandemic. A lot of people, it was very difficult to appraise properties. It was really difficult to see how the pandemic was going to affect multifamily. So on the second quarter of the year, volumes dropped to near historical lows, and people were just not really buying. But at the end of the year, investors basically came back with a vengeance, and they saw how well the area was doing as far as vacancies, as far as rent growth, and they started looking again for properties. And this is a fact. You see here, the fourth quarter of 2020 is the third highest over the past 15 years, despite the pandemic. And one of the things that's fueling that is, if you look at this chart, and this is the investment by the origin of the buyer and the seller. So it's either a local buyer or seller, or a national one. So if they're based out of Hampton Roads, it's local, national, anywhere else. A lot of these sales were 80% were bought by people from outside of Hampton Roads, whereas only 20% were bought by people locally. And most of the deals that were signed were sold by locals. So here we see an increasing interest of people outside of the market that are looking at Hampton Roads to diversify their portfolios. So that's it for my overview. Thankfully, I didn't go over time. So at this point, I would like to know if there are any questions. I am checking the chat. Yes, I believe this is being recorded, and there would be, I'll make sure to get these on PDF format over to y'all.
All right. Does anyone have any questions?
Teresa, I got one.
Sure.
I can't type it out quick enough. I guess I could turn on my camera so you can see. As you talk to other markets around the country, what are you hearing in terms of I'll call it the cost to entry into housing and how they're changing in light of all the new restrictions? I know one of the concerns here in Virginia is that when you add things into the eviction process, when you put additional steps, you drag out the timeline, that somewhere people are going to look to mitigate that risk, and it's probably going to be on the front end, whether it's enhanced security deposits or things like that. Are you seeing any trend in that direction, or is that something you've looked at?
Not specifically for multifamily. I've had a lot of conversation because I also cover retail, office, industrial. I've had a few conversations, and I wouldn't be surprised if this comes into play into multifamily about, for example, tenants on the retail side, which, has done the worst out of all property types, asking for specific language on their lease when it comes to things like closing due to pandemics or being forced by the government to not operate for a certain amount of days. So it's definitely in the minds of people, creating these lease agreements and what is commonly referred to as boilerplate language. When you sign into a new apartment, you just kind of, or at least I didn't really read through most of it. I just signed and wanted my apartment, right? So I wouldn't be surprised. I haven't heard anything from the multifamily side, but I wouldn't be surprised if, some extra measures were taken to make sure that things like these are taken into consideration here in the future. But I personally have not heard of any anecdotes related to that.
And just follow up in the retail market, do you expect that to affect the cost of the retail space?
As of now, it's not so much the cost, it's just the terms, right? So the tenant, and some of these have actually been from the landlord side, where they're saying, I know you as a brand new restaurant might be a little skeptical of signing some space with me. I'm going to give you this clause in the lease that says if for some reason you can't operate, I'm going to knock off 75% of your rent while that's going on. Okay. So, and just so I understand, because this is something I would like to follow up on about. When you mean cost, are you talking about cost to the landlord or the tenant?
Well, actually, both sides, but more or less focused on the landlord side, because the concept of a security deposit is to mitigate your risk of something bad happening. And as the timeline goes on, for example, the concern I'm hearing a lot right now is, I can't afford to have someone just in a unit that isn't paying. That's especially when I could rent it somewhere else. Right. So how do you mitigate that risk? Is the cost of mitigating that risk going up?
Yeah. Yeah, no, I haven't personally heard about anything like that, but that's definitely an interesting story to dig into, and something that I was looking for, not only before this presentation, but I recently came out with the multifamily video for CoStar. Is I wanted to hear more stories about how people are dealing with that, right? So vacancies look great on our data, but how many people are not able to pay rent right now, and where are those people going to go once they get, if they get evicted here in the future, and what's that going to do to the entire market? But definitely a really interesting side to look at.
I think you have a lot of people on that can give you the anecdotal information on that.
Yeah.
Emiliano, you did have a couple other questions here.
Yeah.
Mike Hall asked, is there any indication whether 1, 2, or 3 bedroom units are in more demand?
Yeah, so, and I didn't have a slide on it, but that's something that I have definitely looked at. So at the beginning of the pandemic, when everyone was kind of running around and trying to predict what was going to happen, a lot of the predictions were, 1 and 2 star are going to get hit extremely hard because those are the people that are probably going to lose their job quicker, while 4 and 5 star are going to do great, um, because a lot of those people are probably in office jobs and will be able to transition into work from home. So far, and you see that at the market level, all of the properties are doing pretty similarly as far as rent growth and vacancy rates. Um, One of the things, obviously, most of the properties that delivered are 4 and 5 star, some 3 star, and all of those leased up extremely quickly. So it seems like across the board, they're all doing pretty well, and we see the most rent growth from the last time I checked, most rent growth over in the 3 star. So that middle ground between people that are still working from home and people that are able to, re-enter the workforce as restrictions are getting rolled back. Um,
Another question is, Mike's follow-up question to that is, what does 4 and 5 star mean as far as bedroom count?
um, Please feel free to unmute if I'm not understanding your
Oh
rank.
yeah, Mike, unmute yourself.
Do you
Hey,
mean like how many units we have for 4 and 5 star in the entire area?
it was just more of a general idea of whether or not you were seeing the 2 and 3 bedroom units being in more demand versus 1 bedroom, or just it's obviously a little deeper as far as detail statistically, but
Yeah, no, I see what you mean. That's definitely playing. That was definitely playing a lot in the markets that I talked about that weren't doing too hot. Um, like Washington D.C., people were moving out of the downtown areas and looking into suburban Maryland and suburban Virginia for like 2 bedrooms, 3 bedrooms. I'm currently sitting in a 2 bedroom on the Beltway here in College Park, Maryland, and I moved from a 1 bedroom to a 2 bedroom so I can have a bit of an office space, right? So in Hampton Roads, we don't see that as much because of one of them is the military employment and people still going out to work, not as many people working from home. And also the fact that 1 bedrooms are just bigger in Hampton Roads. I compared the size of downtown DC 1 bedrooms is about 700 square feet, the average. And downtown Norfolk, it's about 735 square feet. So the units are just bigger, and it seems like um, especially for 4 and 5 stars, these units have performed well across the board from 1 bedrooms, even not as much studios, but studios all the way to 3 bedrooms and your very rare 4 bedroom that may be out there, if any.
thank you.
Another question here. What do you attribute the stability in the market to?
Um, so I kind of peppered it in throughout the presentation, but one of them is Hampton Roads has always been a very slow and steady growth market, at least in terms of the economy. So it took Hampton Roads like 10 years to recover all the jobs that it lost from the great financial crisis in 2008, right? So it was growing at like 1.5%, 2% population every year. So that slow growth meant that the people that were coming here were coming into jobs from either the military or the port that were well established. When the coronavirus hit and people over on the retail side, and I know it hit Virginia Beach pretty strongly too on the hospitality side, the government dollars were still coming in. Huntington and Ingalls closed, I think, maybe one day, and they employed 25,000 people over in the peninsula, right? The Norfolk Naval Station, they never closed. They were still employing people. All of their all of their contractors were still working. There was still demand for medical services in the area. So that's probably one of the biggest engines of stability, at least here in the area, as opposed to, some of the really big growth markets like Washington, D.C. or Los Angeles, where you have massive amounts of people moving in, but when the pandemic hit, they couldn't really afford to pay that much money for a downtown unit, and they decided to move out.
Great. Does anyone else have any other questions?
Cool. Really quickly, and sorry about this. So let me put again our information up on the screen. There you go. Please reach out again with any questions. That's my email. That's my cell phone number. If you want to chat, I mentioned earlier that any interesting stories that you have, I'm more than happy to talk about. If anything that I said today doesn't really sound right, also reach out to me. I'm super interested to hear what you all have to say. But I want to thank Vama again for putting this together and letting me speak to all of you.
Yes, of course. This has been really good information. Amy, Melissa, Kristen, do you guys have anything to add? Brent, before we sign off?
Hi, can you hear me?
Yeah.
Okay,
Hey.
sorry. Hi, it's Amy. And you don't need to show my lovely face to everybody. It's quite all right.
Late.
No, thank you very much, Emiliano, for sharing that information with everyone today. And of course, to reiterate, thank you, Vama, and everyone that did attend. Definitely there's a lot happening still in our market from this pandemic, and we're all trying to get the answers. So if there is anything additional that myself or any of the Hampton Roads associates can help you with, please reach out to us. And we do greatly appreciate everyone's continued business with us, and we're here to help you all with all of your marketing needs. And I hope that this gloomy Friday turns around for all of us and the rain stops and we can enjoy a beautiful weekend.
Absolutely. And just another plug, we are doing this for Central Virginia, for the Charlottesville Valley area, and for the Roanoke, Lynchburg, Blacksburg area. So if you have properties in any of those areas and want to sit in on those presentations, you can go to our website and register there, our calendar, and register there.
Thank you for mentioning that, Teresa.
Yeah, well, I didn't know,
We'll see you all there.
Maybe statewide, you never know.
Yes.
So awesome. Well, thank you guys so much for the great information. If you want to just send Juanisha Emiliano the presentation, she can get it out to all the people who are registered to attend. We did record this, so the people that registered but weren't able to sign on this morning, we'll send them the recording. And yeah, thank you guys.
Teresa.
Happy Friday.
Teresa.
Thank you.
Friday.
Oh, I don't know if everyone hung up already.
No.
I was just going to add, I completely forgot, but we do have state of the markets done basically countrywide. So if anyone does have, questions in regards to other areas, they can absolutely reach out to me and I can get them in touch with either that market analyst or share a recording that's been previously done as well.
Oh, that's good information, because I know a lot of our management companies have properties in North Carolina and Florida, Texas, all that stuff. So great.
Absolutely. Yeah. Sorry. I'll be more prepared next week on Richmond.
No. You're fine, hon. All right, guys. Well, thank you.
Thank you.
Thank
Bye,
you,
y'all.
guys.
And
Thank you.
Take care. Thank you.
all right.